Picture this, a 12-year-old girl standing on a cracked sidewalk holding everything she owns, $1.27 in coins, and a wrinkled dollar bill, watching a scarred biker twice her size freeze like she just handed him the world. 24 hours later, nearly 1,000 motorcycles rumble down her street, and the entire neighborhood thinks it's the end. But what looks like a threat becomes the most beautiful invasion this tired block has ever seen. Stay until the end, and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far kindness can ride. The morning Amara Brooks changed everything started the way every morning started in Eastgate, with something broken. The alarm clock didn't go off because the outlet in her bedroom had shorted out again sometime around 3 a.m. The sun did the waking instead, slicing through the gap in curtains that wouldn't close all the way, no matter how many times Grandma Ruth tried to fix the rod. Amara blinked awake to golden light painting patterns across water stains on the ceiling, each one a map of some leak they'd patched, but never quite defeated. She was 12 years old, small for her age, with natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and eyes that noticed everything, especially the things people tried to hide. She lay there for a moment, listening to the house settle and creak around her like an old ship testing its boards. Down the hall she could hear Grandma Ruth already moving the familiar shuffle step that meant her hip was bothering her again, but she'd never admit it. Amara sat up and immediately looked to her dresser. The glass jar caught the morning light, transforming the coins inside into something almost magical. She'd labeled it with a strip of masking tape in her careful handwriting, "Dreams." Every coin represented something: a returned bottle, a neighbor's gratitude for helping carry groceries, the occasional dollar from Grandma when she could spare it. The jar was maybe a third full, not enough for the art supplies she wanted, not enough for much of anything, really. But it was hers. She pulled on jeans, worn soft at the knees, and a hoodie that had belonged to her older cousin before he moved away for college. The cousin who'd made it out, who everyone held up as proof that Eastgate kids could do more than survive. The hoodie smelled like the lavender sachets Grandma Ruth tucked into every drawer, fighting a losing battle against the mildew that crept through the house every humid season. "Mari, you up?" Grandma Ruth's voice carried down the hallway, warm as Sunday morning, even on a Thursday. "Yes, ma'am." Amara grabbed the jar. She always took it with her to count during breakfast, a ritual that made the saving feel real, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. Grandma Ruth stood at the stove, her back to the doorway, humming something old and holy that Amara had heard all her life, but never knew the name of. She was a sturdy woman, built for endurance rather than speed, with silver-threaded hair twisted into a bun, and hands that had scrubbed floors, changed diapers, buried loved ones, and still found the strength to be gentle. The kitchen smelled like grits and something sweet, maybe cinnamon, maybe just the memory of better times when there was money for extras. "Saw the sunrise this morning," Grandma Ruth said without turning around, stirring the pot with a practiced rhythm. "Looked like God spilled paint across the sky, red and orange, so bright it could wake the dead." Amara set the jar on the table, careful to avoid the spot where the laminate was peeling. "Red sky and morning sailors take warning. Listen to you talking like some old fisherman." Grandma Ruth turned with a small smile, carrying 2 bowls. "When'd you get so wise? You told me that, like 100 times. Must be why you remember it then." She set the bowls down, and Amara saw it was just grits with a little butter melting in the center. No eggs. The milk in the fridge was probably close to turning. It was the 3rd week of the month, which meant the money was running thin again, stretched like fabric over a frame too big for it. Amara unscrewed the jar lid and poured the contents onto the table, counting automatically. Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. She organized them into neat stacks, her fingers moving with the efficiency of a bank teller. Grandma Ruth watched while she ate, not commenting, just present. $1.27, Amara announced. Plus this. She smoothed out a dollar bill that had been folded so many times it was soft as cloth. $2.27 total. That's good, baby. Real good. Grandma Ruth's voice carried layers pride in the disciplined sadness at the necessity hope that it would amount to something. What you saving for this time? Still those fancy colored pencils. The artist set, 72 colors. Amara traced the edge of one of the quarters. Ms. Rodriguez at school said if I'm serious about art, I need proper materials. These would last years if I take care of them. You take care of everything. Grandma Ruth reached across and squeezed Amara's hand, her palm rough and warm. That's your gift, and your burden both. Don't lose it, but don't let it break you neither. Amara didn't fully understand what that meant, but she nodded anyway. She scooped the coins back into the jar, listening to them clink and settle, then screwed the lid on tight. The grits were good. Grandma Ruth had a way of making even simple food taste like love. And for a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that only happens between people who don't need words to fill every space. Then the porch light flickered. It wasn't dramatic, just a little stutter in the yellowed glow that stayed on too late every morning because the automatic timer had stopped working months ago. But Grandma Ruth's spoon paused halfway to her mouth, and Amara felt it, that little spike of tension that came with every new thing that broke in this house, because every repair meant money they didn't have. Just the bulb, Grandma Ruth said, like saying it would make it true. Probably just needs tightening. But when Amara glanced through the kitchen window toward the porch, she could see the fixture itself was cracked, leaking dark water stains down the siding. Another thing to add to the list. Another problem to solve later, which usually meant never. After breakfast, Amara washed both bowls by hand. The dishwasher had died 2 winters ago, and set them in the drying rack that listed slightly to the left. Grandma Ruth had already moved to the living room, settling into her chair with the vinyl seat that had been patched so many times it looked like a quilt. She picked up her knitting fingers, moving automatically through stitches, while her eyes drifted to the window facing the street. You got plans today? Grandma Ruth asked. Library's doing that summer reading thing. Thought I'd walk over, maybe pick up something new. Amara dried her hands on a towel embroidered with flowers, whose colors had faded to ghosts of themselves. You need anything while I'm out? We're all right for now. You just be back before dark, and Mari... Amara paused in the doorway. Yes, ma'am. When you can help, you help. But you mind who you help and why. Not everyone's grateful, and not everyone's safe. Grandma Ruth's eyes, when they met Amara's, carried the weight of experience. You got a good heart. Don't let nobody take advantage of it. I won't. I know you won't. I'm just reminding you that I know. Grandma Ruth smiled, then soft and sad. Go on now. Let me know if you see Mr. Chen at the corner store. He mentioned he might have some day-old bread he can't sell. Amara grabbed the jar. She always took it with her, liked the weight of her own discipline in her hands, and headed out into the morning that was already heating up like a skillet left too long on the burner. Eastgate baked under a sun that showed no mercy. The neighborhood stretched out in a grid of tired houses, each one leaning slightly into its foundation, paint peeling like sunburned skin chain-link fences, rusting in patterns that looked almost decorative until you got close enough to see the sharp edges. Every third streetlight was out. Every other sidewalk was cracked enough to trip you if you weren't paying attention. Dogs barked from yards where grass had given up and dust had taken over. But people still lived here. Still loved here. Still hung laundry on sagging lines and planted flowers in whatever would hold soil. Mrs. Patterson, 3 doors down, had a garden of plastic flamingos arranged like they were migrating somewhere better. The Torres family kept their lawn neat as a golf course, the only green thing on the block, watered with determination and hope. Old Mr. Freeman sat on his porch every day at exactly 3 p.m., radio playing blues so old they sounded like prayers. Amara walked the familiar route toward downtown passing faces she knew, and some she didn't. She nodded to Ms. Angela, who was sweeping her porch for the 2nd time that morning, not because it was dirty, but because routine was the thing that kept chaos from the door. She waved to little Marcus, who was riding his bike in careful circles in the street, staying close to home like his mama taught him. The jar clinked softly in her hands, with each step a rhythm she'd memorized. 2:27. Not enough for the art set, but closer than yesterday. That's what Grandma Ruth always said. Closer than yesterday means we're still moving forward. The heat rose in waves off the asphalt, making the air shimmer like something half real. By the time Amara reached the main road, her shirt was sticking to her back, and her throat was dry. She thought about stopping at Mr. Chen's store for a cold drink, but decided against it. Every dollar spent was a dollar not saved, and besides, the water fountain at the library was free. She was almost past the gas station, the one with prices that were always 3 cents higher than everywhere else, but stayed in business because it was the only one within walking distance when she heard the engine. It wasn't a car sound. Too deep, too deliberate, like thunder contained in metal. Amara turned and saw the motorcycle pulling in, and even from a distance she could tell everything about it was wrong for Eastgate. Too clean, too powerful, too much like something from a movie where bikes meant freedom instead of just another way to get to work. The man who climbed off was enormous. Not tall enormous, though he had height, but big in the way that made you take a step back instinctively, all shoulders and presence, and the kind of weight that comes from years of hard living. He wore leather despite the heat, a vest covered in patches that Amara couldn't read from where she stood, and his arms were sleeved in tattoos that twisted and writhed like they had their own stories to tell. His beard was shot through with gray, pulled into a braid that hung to mid-chest, and when he pulled off his helmet, his face was all hard angles and old scars. Amara should have kept walking. Grandma Ruth's voice in her head. Mind who you help and why. But something made her stop. Maybe it was the way the man stood there staring at the gas pump like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Maybe it was the way his hands, huge and rough, patted pockets with increasing desperation. Maybe it was the way his shoulders, broad enough to carry the world, suddenly slumped like something in him had just given out. She watched him walk into the station. Through the grimy window she saw him approach the counter, saw him pull out a wallet, saw him count what was inside. Even from outside she could read the defeat in the way his head dropped. He came back out, moving slower now, and stood beside his bike like a captain standing on a sinking ship. The sun beat down. The heat rose. And Amara saw something she recognized in the set of his jaw. The tightness around his eyes, the same look Grandma Ruth got when she checked the bills against the checking account balance and had to decide what wouldn't get paid this month. The look of someone who'd run out of options. Amara glanced down at the jar in her hands. 2:27. A third of the way to her dream. Weeks of collecting, saving, hoping. When you can help, you help. The man she'd later learn his road name was Bear, given to him 20 years ago in a bar fight that had become legend, didn't see her approach at first. He was staring at his bike like it had personally betrayed him, one hand on the seat. the other rubbing his face in the universal gesture of someone trying to physically push away their problems. "Excuse me," Amara said, her voice smaller than she intended. He looked down, and for a second something crossed his face. Surprise, confusion, maybe concern that a kid was approaching him at all. Up close, he was even bigger, and the patches on his vest were clearer. Now Crosswind Brotherhood MC, and beneath it symbols and words that spoke of roads traveled and bonds forged in ways Amara couldn't begin to understand. Yeah, his voice was gravel and dust rough from years of wind and smoke and shouting over engines. "You short on gas money?" Bear blinked like the question was in a language he almost understood. "What? You look like you're short." Amara held up the jar coins, catching the light. "I have some." For a moment he just stared at her. Really looked at her, this skinny kid in a too-big hoodie, holding a glass jar like it contained something precious, standing in a gas station parking lot offering money to a man 3 times her size, covered in leather and ink, and the unmistakable markers of a life lived hard. "Kid, He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. "That's real kind, but I can't take your money." "Why not?" "You need it right." "Yeah, but..." He gestured at the jar at her, at the absurdity of the situation. "That's yours. You saved that." "I can save more." Amara unscrewed the lid, the metal squeaking slightly. "That's the thing about saving, you can always start again." She poured the contents into his palm before he could protest, quarters and dimes and nickels and pennies clinking against his calloused skin, followed by the soft dollar bill that fluttered down like a white flag. His hand, which had probably broken jaws and bent steel, trembled slightly under the weight of $2.27s. "Why?" The word came out rough, like it hurt to ask. "Why would you do this?" Amara looked up at him. Really looked, and saw past the leather and the ink and the size. Saw tired eyes. Saw someone far from home. Saw someone who'd maybe forgotten that kindness still existed in the world. "When you can help, you help," she said, echoing Grandma Ruth like scripture. "That's the rule." She turned to leave, had made it maybe 3 steps, when his voice stopped her. "Wait. Kid, wait." She turned back. Bear was still standing there, frozen, staring at the coins and dollar in his palm like they were burning him, like they were the most valuable things he'd ever held. "What's your name?" "Amara. People call me Mari." "Mari." He said it carefully, like he was memorizing it. "I'm Bear. And His voice cracked, actual emotion breaking through. "I ain't gonna forget this. You understand, I ain't never gonna forget this." Amara shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity in his eyes. "It's just gas money." "No." Bear shook his head slowly. "No, it ain't. But you're too young to know that yet." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and turned away again, walking back toward the street with her empty jar, feeling somehow lighter and heavier at the same time. Behind her, she heard the clink of coins, imagined him standing there, trying to process what had just happened. The library was only 10 more minutes away, but Amara barely noticed the walk. Her mind kept going back to the look in Bear's eyes, like she'd handed him more than money. Like she'd handed him something he'd lost, and thought he'd never find again. She didn't know that at that exact moment Bear was sitting on the curb beside his bike, the $2.27s clutched in his fist, tears running down his face into his beard. Didn't know that he'd been riding for 3 days straight, running from something or toward something he wasn't even sure anymore. Didn't know that he'd been so close to empty in every possible way that her simple act had cracked something open in his chest. She didn't know that he was pulling out a battered flip phone, the kind that seemed ancient in an age of smartphones, and scrolling through contacts he hadn't called in months, years, some of them decades. She didn't know that her empty jar had just set something in motion that would change not just her life, but the entire landscape of Eastgate. All she knew was that Grandma Ruth would ask about the jar, and she'd have to explain, and Grandma Ruth would probably smile that sad, proud smile and say something about good hearts and dangerous generosity. Amara made it to the library, enjoyed the blast of air conditioning, picked out 3 books, 2 about artists and 1 about birds, because she liked drawing birds, and started the walk home around noon when the heat was at its worst. The house looked the same as always when she approached, leaning slightly to the left porch, sagging in the middle, that broken light fixture casting shadows that looked wrong even in daylight. But Grandma Ruth was on the porch now, standing in a way that meant something was different. "Mari," she called out, as Amara came up the cracked walkway. "We got a visitor." That's when Amara saw him. Bare but different now. No bike, no leather vest, just jeans and a plain t-shirt that showed even more tattoos running down his arms. He was holding grocery bags, 4 of them, looking uncertain, in a way that made him seem smaller despite his size. "Hey," he said when Amara reached the porch. "Hope this is okay. I couldn't." He gestured helplessly with the bags. "You gave me what you had. Least I can do is make sure you got food." Grandma Ruth's eyes moved between them, reading the situation with the speed of someone who'd learned to assess threats and gifts in equal measure. "This the man you gave your jar money to?" "Yes, ma'am." "And now he's here with groceries?" "Appears so." Grandma Ruth studied Bear for a long moment. He stood there, this mountain of a man holding grocery bags like offerings, meeting her gaze without flinching, but also without challenge. Finally, she nodded. "Well, don't just stand there. Bring them in before the milk spoils. And you," she pointed at Bear, "you'll stay for lunch. Won't take no for an answer. Any man who repays kindness with more kindness deserves a meal and a conversation." Bear's face did something complicated: gratitude and disbelief, and something that might have been relief all mixed together. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." They sat at the kitchen table, the one with the peeling laminate, and ate sandwiches that Grandma Ruth made with the fresh bread and cold cuts Bear had brought. Amara refilled her jar with water and set it in the window, already thinking about starting to save again. The conversation was awkward at first. What do you say to a biker who shows up at your door because a kid gave him gas money? But Grandma Ruth had a way of pulling stories out of people. Bear talked about the road, about the brotherhood, about how he'd been riding since he was 16 and never quite figured out how to stop. He talked about the men and women he rode with spread across the country, connected by more than just motorcycles, by a code, he said, by an oath that went deeper than most people understood. "One rider down, all riders rise," he said, tracing a finger through the condensation on his glass. "That's the oath. You fall, we pick you up. You need, we provide. You're lost, we find you." "Sounds like family," Grandma Ruth observed. "Is family. Chosen family, but that sometimes makes it stronger." Bear looked at Amara. "What you did today, Mari, that's the purest version of that oath I've ever seen. You saw someone down, you picked them up. No questions, no judgment, just help. That's how Grandma raised me." "Then your grandma's a wise woman." "Don't need a biker to tell me that," Grandma Ruth said, but she was smiling. "Though it's nice to hear." Bear stayed another hour helping wash dishes, checking the porch light that was flickering worse now, offering to fix it, but accepting when Grandma Ruth said they'd manage. But before he left, before he walked to the truck, Amara only now noticed parked down the street. He paused in the doorway. "I'm going to be straight with you," he said, looking at both of them. "What happened today, it changed something in me. Reminded me why we ride in the first place, why we have the oath. I'm going to tell my brothers about this, about her. They need to know that kindness like this still exists." "You don't need to make a fuss," Grandma Ruth said. Ain't about fuss. It's about respect. Bear looked at Amara one more time. Thank you, Mari. For real. You saved more than my bike today. He left, and Amara watched from the window as he climbed into an old pickup truck that looked like it had crossed the country several times and was ready to do it again. She saw him sit there for a moment, phone in hand, before pulling away. That man's got something heavy on his mind, Grandma Ruth said, coming to stand beside her. Think we'll see him again? Maybe. Maybe not. But I'll tell you this, you did good today, baby. Scary good in a way. When you give like that with your whole heart, it echoes. Can't always predict where the echo will end up, but it always comes back somehow. Amara thought about that as evening fell, as she helped Grandma Ruth make dinner from the groceries Bear had brought as they ate together and washed dishes and settled into the evening routine that had shaped their lives. She thought about echoes and ripples and the way one small act could mean so much to someone else. She didn't think about motorcycles or brotherhoods or oaths. She didn't think about what Bear was doing at that exact moment, parked at a rest stop 40 miles out of town, scrolling through contacts with shaking hands. She didn't think about the message he was composing, editing, perfecting, then sending to numbers scattered across 12 states. Brothers and sisters. A kid saved me from myself today. 12 years old gave me everything she had because I was short on gas. $1.27 and change. Her whole savings. Didn't know me, didn't fear me, just helped, because that's who she is. I owe her my life. We owe her our respect. If you're free, if you can ride, if the oath still means something, meet me in Eastgate. Dawn 3 days from now. We're gonna show this kid and her grandmother what family really looks like. She didn't think about the fact that in dusty garages and small apartments and houses, both humble and grand men and women were reading that message, feeling something stir in their chests, remembering why they wore patches and rode thousands of miles for people they'd never met. She just climbed into bed, looked at her empty jar on the dresser, and smiled. Tomorrow she'd start filling it again. That was how saving worked. That was how hope worked. That was how kindness worked, if you were patient enough to let it grow. Outside, the broken porch light flickered 3 times and went out, completely plunging the front of the house into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The night settled over Eastgate like it always did, hot and close and full of the sounds of a neighborhood trying to rest. But across the country, engines were beginning to wake. 300 miles northeast, in a garage that smelled like motor oil and decades of brotherhood, a man called Chains read the message on his phone 3 times before he believed it. He was 58, built like a fire hydrant, with hands that had rebuilt more engines than he could count, and a heart that remembered every kindness ever shown to him. The phone screen glowed in the dim light of his workspace, illuminating tattoos that told the story of 30 years on the road. Bear's words hit him like a punch to the chest, not painful, but stunning. Stopping everything. A kid saved me from myself. Chains set down the wrench he'd been holding and stared at the wall where pictures hung in crooked frames, brothers who'd passed, sisters who'd moved on, faces from runs that had become legend. Somewhere in those faces was the memory of who he used to be before the brotherhood found him lost, angry, looking for a fight, because fighting was easier than feeling. He picked up his own phone, scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in 6 months. It rang twice. Yeah. The voice on the other end was suspicious, cautious. You get Bear's message. A pause. Then, just read it. You thinking what I'm thinking? If you're thinking we ride, then yeah. Chains walked to the window, looking out at his bike, parked under a tarp. One rider down, all riders rise. Ain't just words, brother. Never was. 3 days. That's tight. Then we better start packing. He hung up and immediately opened his contacts again. The message went to 15 people, and within 20 minutes, all 15 had responded. Within an hour, the word had spread like wildfire through dry grass, text messages, phone calls, old-school CB radio chatter on frequencies most people had forgotten existed. By midnight, nearly 80 riders across 4 states knew about the kid in Eastgate, who'd given everything to help a stranger. In a small apartment in Detroit, a woman called Sage read the message while her 2 kids slept in the next room. She was a single mother, worked 2 jobs, hadn't been on a long ride in over a year. But she remembered being 19 and stranded on a highway in Tennessee, remembered how Bear and 3 other riders had stopped, fixed her bike, fed her, and sent her on her way with enough money to make it home. She looked at her calendar, did the math on her shifts, and started making calls to see who could watch her kids. In a farmhouse in rural Kansas, an old man called Prophet Roadname, earned from his habit of knowing things before they happened, sat on his porch and watched the stars. His phone had died years ago. He didn't believe in them. But his landline rang at 1 a.m., and when he heard the story, he simply said, "I'll be there," hung up, and walked to his barn, where a 1972 Harley sat waiting like a faithful dog. In Phoenix, in Seattle, in small towns, whose names most people would never know, the message traveled. And with it came something else, a stirring, a remembering, a reconnection to the oath they'd all sworn in different ways at different times. One rider down, all riders rise. Bear sat in a motel room 2 states over from Eastgate, his phone buzzing constantly with responses. He'd expected maybe 20 riders, maybe 30 if the weather was good, and work schedules aligned. But the numbers kept climbing 50, 70, 100. People he hadn't seen in a decade, saying they'd be there. People he'd helped once, saying they remembered. People he'd never met, saying the story alone was enough. He called his chapter president a man called Hammer, who'd been riding since before Bear was born. "You started something," Hammer said, his voice gravelly with age and cigarettes. "Hope you know what you're doing." "Honestly, no idea. Just felt right." Right don't always mean easy. You got a plan for when we all show up. Can't just roll 100 bikes into a neighborhood and expect nobody to notice. Bear rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted. "We show respect. We give thanks. We help however we can, and then we leave. Clean, quiet, no drama." "Brother, when has anything involving this many riders ever been quiet? Then we make this the first time." Hammer was silent for a moment. "Then, I'm bringing the whole chapter. 23 of us. We'll be there at dawn." The phone calls continued through the night. Bear tried to sleep, but couldn't, his mind racing through logistics and possibilities and the weight of what he'd set in motion. He kept seeing Amara's face, that matter-of-fact kindness, the way she'd poured her whole savings into his hand like it was nothing and everything at the same time. "You saved more than my bike today," he'd told her. He hadn't been lying. Back in Eastgate, Amara woke to Friday morning with no knowledge of the storm gathering on distant roads. She noticed immediately that Grandma Ruth was already up unusual, since she typically slept until the sun was full and bright. The smell of coffee drifted through the house, real coffee, not the cheap instant stuff they usually made do with. "Grandma," Amara padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Ruth stood at the stove making eggs. Actual eggs scrambled with cheese, and there was bread in the toaster. The groceries Bear had brought transformed into a breakfast that felt like luxury. "Morning, baby. Figured we should use this food while it's fresh. Man was generous enough to bring it. Least we can do is enjoy it properly." They ate together, and Amara noticed Grandma Ruth seemed different, lighter somehow, like something heavy had been set down. Maybe it was just having a full pantry for once. Maybe it was the memory of Bear's visit proof that kindness circled back. "You thinking about that biker?" Ruth asked, reading her granddaughter like always. "Little bit. Wonder if he made it where he was going." "Probably did. Men like that, they know how to take care of themselves. Rough around the edges, sure, but there's honor there. Could see it in how he looked at you, like you reminded him of something he'd forgotten." "What's that?" Ruth smiled. "That the world still got good in it. Easy to forget when you're riding alone for too long." After breakfast, Amara helped with dishes, and then retreated to her room with her library books. But she couldn't focus on the words. Her eyes kept drifting to the empty jar on her dresser. Starting over felt harder than she'd expected. Not the saving part, she could do that. But the emptiness seemed bigger now, knowing what the money had meant to someone else. She thought about Bear's face when she'd asked why he couldn't take her money. The way he'd looked at her like she was speaking a language he'd forgotten. The way his voice had cracked when he said he'd never forget. Outside, Mrs. Patterson was arranging her plastic flamingos into a new formation. Mr. Freeman's radio drifted through the afternoon, playing something slow and sad. The Torres family's sprinkler hissed and stuttered, fighting to keep their grass alive. Normal Friday sounds in Eastgate. The sun tracked across the sky, while across the country riders were making preparations. In Ohio, a man called Wrench was draining his savings account $300 he'd been holding for emergencies. This counted. This was what the money was for, even if he hadn't known it until now. He bought gas cards and stopped at a grocery store, loading up on non-perishables that could fit in his saddlebags. In Colorado, two sisters who rode together were plotting their route. 1,500 miles in 3 days was aggressive, but possible if they pushed it. They'd done harder rides for lesser reasons. They packed light, called ahead to friends along the way who could offer couches and showers, and checked their bikes with the thoroughness of people who knew that mechanical failure in the middle of nowhere was more than inconvenient. It could be deadly. In Tennessee, an entire charter was mobilizing. 17 riders ranging in age from 23 to 71, all committed to making the journey. They pooled resources, divided supplies, and planned to ride in formation, safer that way, more impressive too. Their chapter president, a woman called Red, for reasons involving a bar fight and someone's broken nose, sent a message to Bear. "We're bringing tools and we're bringing money. That kid's getting more than thanks." The responses kept coming. Bear's phone became a lifeline, and a burden buzzing constantly with confirmations, questions, promises. He created a group chat, tried to coordinate, but the movement had taken on a life of its own. Numbers climbed past 200, then 300. Saturday morning, with 1 day left before the gathering, Bear realized they weren't looking at 100 riders anymore. They were looking at close to 1,000. He called Hammer in a panic. "This is too big. We can't roll 1,000 bikes into a residential neighborhood. We'll terrify people. Cops will shut it down before we even..." "Breathe," Hammer cut him off. "You started this because it mattered, because that kid reminded you what the oath means. You think these other riders are coming for any different reason. They want to honor something pure. Let them. But 1,000, so we do it right. We send word, respectful approach, low speed, no revving, no showboating. We come in quiet as we can, we pay our respects, we help however we can, and we leave. Clean. And if the cops show up, then we cooperate. We ain't criminals, Bear. We're family trying to say thank you. Long as we act like it, we'll be fine." Bear wanted to believe that. He sent out messages with guidelines, rules, expectations. But he knew that once 1,000 bikes started moving, control was an illusion. All he could do was hope that the same spirit that brought them together would keep them unified in purpose. Sunday morning arrived with a sunrise that painted the sky in shades of warning red and orange and pink, beautiful and ominous in equal measure. Amara woke to Grandma Ruth's voice, urgent, but not panicked. "Mari, baby, wake up. Something's happening." She sat up, instantly alert. "What's wrong? I don't know yet, but you need to come see." Amara followed her grandmother to the living room window. Outside, the street looked normal at first. Same houses, same cars, same early morning quiet. But then Ruth pointed, and Amara saw it. A vibration in the air. Not sound yet, but the promise of sound. Like thunder building in the distance, or the earth preparing to shift. The window pane trembled slightly in its frame. The water in a glass on the side table rippled in concentric circles. "What is that?" Amara whispered. "Don't know, but it's getting closer." They stood there, grandmother and granddaughter, watching the street like it might reveal its secrets if they were patient enough. The light grew stronger, the sun climbing, and with it the vibration intensified. Mrs. Patterson stepped out onto her porch, looking confused. The Torres family came to their window. Doors up and down the block opened as people emerged, drawn by a sensation they couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. Then Mr. Freeman's voice carried from his porch, aged and certain. "Lord have mercy! That's engines. Lot of engines." The sound hit them all at once, not loud yet, but unmistakable. The deep, rhythmic rumble of motorcycles, many motorcycles growing steadily closer. Amara felt it in her chest, in her bones, a frequency that bypassed her ears and went straight to something primal. Grandma Ruth's hand found hers squeezed. "Stay close to me." "Grandma, what's happening?" "Not sure yet, baby, but whatever it is, we face it together." The rumble grew, and with it came fear. This was Eastgate, where unexpected gatherings usually meant trouble. Where the sound of many vehicles approaching set off alarm bells in everyone's survival instinct. Neighbors started backing toward their doors. Someone shouted for their kids to get inside. The Torres family disappeared from their window. But Amara stood frozen, a strange feeling growing in her chest. Not quite recognition, but something close. A sense that this impossibility was somehow connected to her, though she couldn't imagine how. The first bike appeared at the end of the street. Then another. And another. And then the street was filling with them, chrome and leather and purpose rolling in with the sunrise behind them like some kind of apocalyptic army. But they moved slowly, carefully, engines purring instead of roaring. Respectful, controlled. "Oh my God," Grandma Ruth breathed. "Oh my God, Mari, there must be—" She couldn't finish, because the bikes kept coming peeling off to line both sides of the street, parking with precision riders dismounting and standing beside their machines in a silence that felt heavier than any sound. Amara's mind raced, trying to count, trying to understand. 50 bikes. 100. 200. They stretched down the block around the corner, filling every available space. Riders in leather and denim, young and old, men and women, all colors and sizes, united by patches and presents. The Crosswind Brotherhood had arrived. And in the center of it all, walking up the cracked sidewalk toward Amara's house, was Bear. He looked different in daylight, surrounded by his people. Not smaller, but more complete somehow, like he'd been a partial image before, and now the whole picture was visible. His face was solemn, determined, and when his eyes found Amara through the window, they carried a message she was only beginning to understand. Grandma Ruth's hand tightened on hers. "Baby, what did you do?" I just gave him gas money, that's all. I swear that's all I did." A patrol car appeared at the end of the street, moving slowly through the sea of motorcycles. Officer Keen Young, and relatively new to Eastgate, climbed out with his hand near his radio, but not on it. His eyes went wide as he took in the scene, hundreds of bikers standing quietly, making no threatening moves, but impossible to ignore by sheer numbers alone. Bear saw the officer and raised one hand in a peaceful gesture, then turned to the assembled riders. His voice carried deep and commanding. Remember why we're here. Respect, gratitude, honor, nothing else. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Amara felt the tension shift. Not disappearing, but transforming into something else, something that felt almost like reverence. Bear approached the porch, and Amara found herself moving toward the door, pulling Grandma Ruth with her. She opened it before he could knock. "Hi," she said. "Because what else do you say when nearly 1,000 bikers show up at your house?" Bear's face did something complicated, a smile trying to break through solemnity. "Hi yourself, Mari. I brought some friends. Hope that's okay." Grandma Ruth stepped forward, still holding Amara's hand. "Son, you better tell me what's happening here before this whole neighborhood loses its mind." "Yes, ma'am." Bear gestured to the assembled riders. "These are my brothers and sisters. All of them heard what your granddaughter did for me, how she gave everything she had to help a stranger, and they wanted to come say thank you, to show her what real family looks like when someone lives by the oath she doesn't even know she's following." "The oath?" Amara asked. "One rider down, all riders rise." Bear's voice was thick with emotion. "You saw someone in need. You helped without thinking twice. That's the purest version of what we're supposed to be. And these people," he gestured again, "they came from 12 states to honor that, to honor you." Officer Keene had approached radio in hand, now looking uncertain. "Sir, I'm going to need to know your intentions here. This is a residential neighborhood, and our intention is to say thank you, officer." Bear turned to him, hands visible and non-threatening. This young lady performed an act of kindness that meant more than she could know. We're here to repay that kindness with respect and gratitude. We'll follow any rules you need to set. We're not here for trouble. Keene looked at the assembled riders, then at Amara, then back to Bear. He was clearly out of his depth, but to his credit, he didn't panic. "How long you planning to be here?" "As long as it takes to properly say thank you. Few hours, maybe. Then we'll be gone like we were never here." "Except for the memory," someone called from the crowd, and quiet laughter rippled through the assembly. Keene spoke into his radio, calling for backup, but not sounding urgent. Then he looked at Grandma Ruth. "Ma'am, this is your property. You comfortable with this?" Ruth was quiet for a long moment, her eyes scanning the crowd. Amara could feel her grandmother's hand trembling slightly, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "These people came a long way to show gratitude to my granddaughter. Least I can do is let them say their piece, long as it stays peaceful." "It will," Bear promised. "You have my word, and the word of every rider here." Keene nodded slowly. "All right, but first sign of trouble." "Won't be any," Bear assured him. The officer retreated to his car, but didn't leave positioning himself where he could watch everything. More neighbors had emerged now, gathering in doorways and on porches, fear mixing with curiosity. The Torres family stood together on their lawn. Mrs. Patterson had abandoned her flamingos to watch from behind her screen door. Old Mr. Freeman sat in his chair, radio silent for once, witnessing something he'd never expected to see in Eastgate. Bear turned back to Amara and Grandma Ruth. "Don't be afraid. They're here for you, Mari. Here to show you what your kindness meant, what it sparked. But if it's too much, if you want us to leave, just say the word and we're gone." Amara looked at the assembled riders. Hundreds of faces, each one different, but united in purpose. Some smiled gently. Some had tears in their eyes. Some just stood at attention, waiting. And she realized with the start that they were all waiting for her. This vast gathering of people had come all this way, and they were waiting for her permission to proceed. She thought about the jar, empty now. Thought about the $2.27 and the wrinkled dollar. Thought about Grandma Ruth's words, "When you can help, you help." She squeezed her grandmother's hand and stepped forward onto the porch, a 12-year-old girl facing an army that had come not to conquer, but to thank. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice small, but carrying in the sudden silence. "Yes," Bear said gently. "We did. Because if we don't honor kindness when we see it, we forget what we're riding for in the first place." He turned to the assembled riders and raised his voice. "Brothers and sisters, this is Amara Brooks, the young lady who reminded us all what the oath really means." The response was thunderous, not shouts or revving engines, but a single, unified gesture. Every rider placed their right hand over their heart and bowed their heads. Hundreds of them moving as one, paying respect to a child who'd shared her last dollar with a stranger. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. Beside her, Grandma Ruth made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Now," Bear said, still addressing the crowd, "we came to say thank you. Let's do it right." The first rider stepped forward. She was a woman who might have been 60, or might have been 80, with silver hair in 2 long braids and eyes that had seen more road than most people could imagine. She moved with a limp, favoring her left leg, but her spine was straight, and her presence commanded attention. When she reached the porch, she stopped and met Amara's eyes. "Name's River," she said, her voice like gravel smoothed by water. "Been riding 43 years, seen a lot of this country, a lot of people, but I ain't never seen kindness as pure as what you showed our brother Bear." She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out an envelope, simple white paper with nothing written on it. "This is from me and my chapter. 6 of us rode together from Montana. Took 3 days, worth every mile." She offered the envelope with both hands, a gesture of respect that made Amara's throat tight. The envelope was thick, heavy, with bills inside, and when Amara took it, River didn't let go immediately. "You don't spend this on necessities," River said, her eyes intense. "Your grandma's bills, your groceries, will handle that separate. This here is for dreams, for art supplies or books or whatever lights you up inside. Because people who give like you gave deserve to have their own dreams funded. You understand?" Amara nodded, unable to speak. River squeezed her hands once, then stepped back and rejoined the crowd. The next rider was already approaching a young man who couldn't have been much older than 25, with nervous energy and a patch that marked him as a prospect, not fully patched in, yet still proving himself. He carried a small wooden box, handcrafted and polished to a shine. "I'm Rookie," he said, and his hands shook slightly as he opened the box. Inside, nestled in velvet, were a dozen items: a silver dollar worn smooth from decades of handling a pair of dice, a small St. Christopher medal, a bullet casing engraved with coordinates, other trinkets that clearly held meaning beyond their appearance. "These are road luck. Things riders gave me when I was starting out, things that kept me safe or reminded me why I ride. I want you to have them." "But these are yours," Amara protested. "They're important to you." "Exactly." Rookie's smile was shaky but genuine. "That's why they're worth giving. My sponsor told me the things that matter most are the things we're meant to pass on. These kept me safe. Now they'll keep you safe, or at least remind you that you got family out here." He placed the box in her hands with a care that suggested he was handing over something sacred. Then he did something unexpected. He saluted crisp and military precise before stepping away. Grandma Ruth's hand found Amara's shoulder, steadying her as a third rider approached. This one was different, expensive leather jacket bike that probably cost more than their house, but his eyes were kind and his approach was humble. "I'm Silver," he said. "Made my money in tech, retired young, spent the last decade riding. Your story got to me because I remember being flat broke standing in a gas station counting change. Someone helped me then. Stranger never saw them again, but I never forgot." He pulled out another envelope, this one clearly stuffed thick. "This is for your grandmother. For the bills I know she's got for the repairs this house needs for the breathing room that lets people think about more than just surviving." He handed it directly to Ruth, who took it with trembling hands. "Son, this is too much." "It's exactly enough," Silver interrupted gently. "And it ain't charity. It's gratitude traveling through time. Someone helped me. I help you someday, you help someone else. That's how it works." Ruth's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled Silver into a hug that surprised them both. He froze for a moment, then hugged back this wealthy stranger and this struggling grandmother, united by an understanding that transcended words. The line continued, and Amara realized with growing astonishment that every single rider had something to give. Not all of them brought money. Some brought practical things, items chosen with thought and care. A woman called Sage presented a leather journal, handmade and beautiful, for writing down your dreams, so you don't forget them. A man called Wrench brought art supplies, the expensive kind, from a real art store, because Bear said you draw, and talent deserves proper tools. Each gift came with a story. Each story revealed a piece of the person giving it. And slowly, through tears and trembling hands and emotions she'd never felt before, Amara began to understand something profound. These people weren't just thanking her. They were showing her a version of the world she'd never known existed, a world where kindness compounded, where giving created more giving, where strangers could become family in the space between one breath and the next. A rider named Ghost, who lived up to his name with pale skin and white blonde hair, approached with a collection of books. "Heard you like the library. These are first editions, some of them signed. Stories about brave kids, about art, about changing the world, one small act at a time." His smile was soft. "Figured you'd appreciate them." The pile of gifts grew on the porch, envelopes and boxes, bags and wrapped packages. Grandma Ruth had to keep carrying things inside, making space, and neighbors who'd been watching in fear started to move closer, drawn by the obvious emotion of the scene. Mrs. Patterson approached cautiously, still keeping her distance from the bikes, but clearly curious. "Ruth, everything okay over here?" "More than okay, Angela." Ruth's face was wet with tears, but her smile was radiant. "These people came to thank Mari for helping one of them. They're showing us what goodness looks like when it travels." Officer Keene had been joined by 2 more patrol cars, but the officers just watched, hands away from weapons, slowly understanding that what they were witnessing wasn't a threat. One of them, an older sergeant named Morales, who'd worked Eastgate for 20 years, shook his head in wonder. "In all my years, I ain't never seen anything like this." A rider overheard and approached him, a woman called Red, with a scar across her eyebrow and a smile that could cut glass. "Then you ain't been paying attention to the right kind of people, officer. We're everywhere waiting for a reason to show what we're about. This kid gave us that reason." The gifts kept coming, but then something shifted. A massive man, easily 6'5" and built like a mountain, approached with a toolbox in one hand and a thoughtful expression on his face. His patch read, "Hammer," and he moved with the authority of someone used to being in charge. "I'm Bear's chapter president," he told Amara and Ruth. "Rode with him for 15 years. Never seen him as moved as when he told us your story." He set the toolbox down and looked at the house. Really looked at it with eyes that catalogued every broken thing, every sign of deferred maintenance. Envelopes are good, cash helps. But you know what helps more? Fixing what's broken so the cash can go to what matters. He turned to the assembled riders. Who here's got skills? Carpentry, electrical, plumbing, painting. Don't be shy now. Hands went up throughout the crowd. Dozens of them. More than Amara could count. Hammer nodded satisfied, then looked back at Ruth. Ma'am, with your permission, we'd like to spend the day making your house right. Fix that porch, sort out that electrical handle, whatever else needs handling. We got the tools, we got the knowledge, and we got the time. What do you say? Ruth looked overwhelmed, her eyes moving from Hammer to the house to Amara and back again. I can't ask you to do that. You ain't asking. We're offering. There's a difference. Hammer's voice was gentle, despite his size. Besides, half these riders are getting restless just standing around. Give us something useful to do, you'd be doing us a favor. Grandma? Amara whispered. Maybe we should let them help. Ruth was quiet for a long moment, pride and need warring on her face. Finally, she nodded. All right. Yes. Thank you. I just thank you. What happened next was like watching a military operation conducted with the precision of people who'd learned to work together across thousands of miles and dozens of runs. Hammer started calling out tasks, and riders responded with efficiency that spoke to years of organized chaos. Within 15 minutes, the street had transformed into a work site. A team descended on the porch, examining the sag, the rot, the places where wood had given up the fight against time and weather. Someone produced a level. Someone else had a saw. Lumber appeared from the back of a pickup truck. Hammer had come prepared, had anticipated this need. The sound of work began, hammers and drills creating a rhythm that was almost musical. Inside, electricians were tracing wiring, finding the shorts and failures that had plagued the house for years. "Whole panel needs replacing," one of them called out. "This thing's a fire waiting to happen." "Got a new one in my truck," another responded. "Commercial grade. This house'll be safer than most new construction when we're done." The broken porch light came down, replaced by a new fixture that one of the riders had purchased that morning, somehow knowing it would be needed. The fence that had been leaning since before Amara was born got straightened, posts reset, wire tightened. Fresh paint appeared. Someone had asked neighbors what color the trim used to be and matched it exactly. Grandma Ruth stood in the middle of it all, tears streaming freely now, watching her home transform. A woman called Sage approached the same one who'd brought the journal and put an arm around her shoulders. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" Sage said. "I don't understand why," Ruth whispered. "Why all this for one small kindness? Because small kindnesses are the biggest things in the world when you're the one receiving them." Sage squeezed her shoulders. "And because we remember. Every rider here has a story about when they were down and someone helped. Your granddaughter reminded us all of those moments, reminded us why we ride in the first place, to find those moments and honor them." More neighbors ventured closer, drawn by curiosity and the obvious goodwill. The Torres family approached, and their teenage son Miguel stared at the bikes with obvious awe. A rider noticed and waved him over. "Want to sit on it?" the rider asked, gesturing to his motorcycle. Miguel looked at his parents, who nodded cautiously. He climbed onto the bike, and his face transformed into pure joy. The rider showed him the controls, explained the mechanics, treated the moment with a seriousness that respected the boy's interest. Other kids started appearing, and suddenly there were a half-dozen children getting their own bike tours, learning about engines and road trips, and the freedom of the open highway. Officer Keene watched it all with an expression that kept shifting between disbelief and something like wonder. He spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, everything's under control here. Actually, it's..." It's good, real good. Community building repairs being made, no issues to report. The voice that came back sounded skeptical. You're telling me 1,000 bikers showed up and everything's peaceful. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Maybe we had this wrong. Maybe we've had a lot of things wrong. By noon, the work was in full swing, and the street had transformed into something between a block party and a barn raising. Someone had brought grills, multiple grills, and food was appearing from saddlebags and coolers. The smell of burgers and hot dogs drifted through the air. Riders were sharing meals with neighbors, conversations, flowing barriers breaking down with every shared story. Amara found herself surrounded by riders, each one wanting to shake her hand, or hear her voice, or just be near the person whose kindness had sparked this gathering. But one rider stood apart, watching from near his bike, with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was older, maybe 70, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. She approached him, drawn by his stillness in the midst of all the activity. "Hi, I'm Amara." "I know who you are, child." His voice was surprisingly soft. "I'm Prophet. Got the name because I tend to know things before they happen. And I knew the second I heard about what you did that it would change things. Bigger than you, bigger than all of us here. You started something that won't stop." I just gave him gas money. "No." Prophet shook his head slowly. "You gave him hope. You gave him proof that innocence and kindness still exist in this world. And that kind of proof spreads like wildfire in dry grass. Can't be contained, can't be controlled. All you can do is watch it burn and hope it burns bright enough to light the way for others." Before Amara could respond, a commotion drew her attention. A news van had arrived, parking awkwardly at the end of the street, and a reporter was climbing out with a cameraman in tow. The reporter was young, ambitious-looking, with perfect hair and an eager expression that suggested she thought she'd stumbled onto something big. Bear saw them and immediately moved to intercept, but the reporter was quick, already approaching Amara with a microphone extended like a weapon. "Hi, I'm Jessica Chen from Channel 7 News. We got reports of a massive biker gathering in Eastgate. Can you tell me what's happening here?" Amara froze, suddenly aware of the camera pointing at her, the microphone thrust in her face, the weight of expectation. She'd never been on camera before, never had to explain anything to anyone beyond her small circle of family and friends. Her mouth went dry. Is it true you gave money to a biker? Is that why they're all here?" The reporter's voice was sharp, probing, looking for the angle that would make the best story. "Are you scared? Do you feel safe with all these motorcycles?" "She feels perfectly safe." Grandma Ruth appeared like a guardian angel, placing herself between Amara and the camera. "These people are family. They came to say thank you, and they're helping us fix our home." That's the story. That's all the story there is. "But surely the presence of so many bikers in a residential neighborhood, they're not bikers like you're implying." Ruth cut her off, her voice sharp enough to cut. "They're people. Good people who ride motorcycles and live by a code that says when someone helps you, you help them back. My granddaughter showed kindness to a stranger, and this is kindness returning tenfold. If that's not a story worth telling right, then you're in the wrong business." The reporter looked taken aback, but she was persistent. She turned to the assembled riders. "Can someone explain what's happening here? Why so many of you came?" Bear stepped forward, and the camera swung to him. He was impressive on film, tall, imposing, but with an openness in his expression that contradicted any stereotype. "We came because a 12-year-old girl reminded us what we're supposed to be about. She saw someone in need and she helped without thinking twice. Gave me everything she had. $2.27. Her entire savings." His voice roughened with emotion. That kind of pure kindness deserves to be honored. So we came. We came to say thank you, to show her what her act of grace meant, and to help her family the way she helped me. But this many people, isn't this excessive? Is there a limit on gratitude? Bear's eyes were steady on the camera. Is there a cap on how much thanks is appropriate? She gave me everything. We're trying to give back in proportion to what that meant. If that scares people, they should ask themselves why kindness on a large scale feels threatening. The reporter seemed to realize she wasn't going to get the sensational angle she'd wanted. She looked around, seeing the work being done, the food being shared, the neighbors who were now mingling with riders, the children laughing on motorcycles, Officer Keene chatting easily with a group of riders about road conditions and best routes through the state. So this is what a community service project. This is family taking care of family, River spoke up, moving into the camera's view. Chosen family, but that makes it stronger, not weaker. This child is one of us now, and we take care of our own. More news vans were arriving, word spreading through media channels about the unusual gathering. Reporters and cameras multiplied, but the riders handled each inquiry with the same message. Kindness given, kindness returned, family formed. The story they were creating wasn't the one the media had expected, and Amara watched as confusion slowly transformed into something else, understanding perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. Amara felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to find Bear there, his expression protective. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. This is your day, your moment. You get to decide how much of it belongs to the cameras. I don't know what to say, Amara admitted. I don't understand why everyone's making such a big deal out of this. Because most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people would have walked past, told themselves it wasn't their problem, protected their own interests. Bear knelt down so he was eye level with her. You didn't. You saw need, and you met it with everything you had. That's rare. That's precious. And in a world that feels like it's forgetting how to care, that's revolutionary. A reporter pushed through, and this time the question was directed at Amara with genuine curiosity rather than sensationalism. How does it feel knowing your kindness brought all these people together? Amara thought about it, really thought. She looked at her house where riders were replacing rotten boards and fixing electrical issues that had made every storm a source of fear. She looked at Grandma Ruth, whose face showed less stress than Amara had seen in months, maybe years. She looked at the gifts piling up, each one, representing not just money but stories, connections, proof that the world held more good than she'd dared to believe. It feels like family, she said finally, her voice quiet but clear. They're family now. All of them. And family shows up for each other. That's what Grandma taught me. That's what they're teaching me right back. The reporter smiled, and it seemed genuine. That's beautiful. Thank you. As the interviews continued around her, Amara found herself pulled back into the center of activity. Riders kept approaching each one wanting a moment, a connection, a chance to be part of the story. But the work never stopped. The house continued its transformation, and with each repair, Amara felt something shifting, not just in the physical structure, but in the neighborhood itself. Mrs. Patterson brought out lemonade, setting up a table on her lawn, and offering drinks to anyone who wanted them. The Torres family contributed paper plates and napkins. Mr. Freeman turned his radio up so music drifted through the work-old blues and soul that seemed to fit the moment perfectly. People who hadn't spoken to their neighbors in years were suddenly standing shoulder to shoulder with riders holding boards while they were nailed in place, offering tools, sharing stories. Officer Keene made a decision. He spoke into his radio, "Send whoever's free over here. Not for crowd control, for participation. This is the kind of community building we're always talking about. Let's be part of it." 20 minutes later, 3 more officers arrived, and Keene put them to work, one helping with the electrical, another holding a ladder, the third directing traffic so the street stayed accessible. The sight of police officers working alongside motorcycle club members should have been surreal, but somehow it felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. As the afternoon deepened, Sergeant Morales approached Grandma Ruth with a thoughtful expression. "Ma'am, I've been watching this all day, and I gotta say in 20 years working this neighborhood, I've never seen people come together like this. What's happening here, it's changing things. You can feel it." "What started with a child sharing what little she had," Ruth replied, her eyes on Amara, who was currently being shown how to properly hold a hammer by a rider called Wrench. Sometimes the smallest acts carry the biggest weight. "Makes me think we've been doing community policing all wrong," Morales admitted. "We try to control to manage to prevent. But maybe what we should be doing is finding ways to facilitate moments like this, to help people help each other." Ruth smiled. "Sounds like wisdom to me, officer. Sounds like wisdom." The porch was nearly complete now. The SAG eliminated new boards gleaming in the afternoon sun railings, straight and strong. Someone had even added a swing, hanging it from chains that would hold for decades. The electrical panel had been replaced, the wiring updated, and every light in the house now worked properly for the first time in years. The fence stood proud and secure, the paint still wet but already transforming the appearance of the property. But there was more. Riders were working on other houses now, with permission from neighbors who'd seen what was possible. Mrs. Patterson's porch steps, which had been a hazard for years, were being rebuilt. The Torres family's fence, which had collapsed in a storm last month, was being repaired. Even Mr. Freeman's radio, which had been dying for weeks, was being examined by a rider who apparently had a degree in electrical engineering. The whole block was transforming, and with it something intangible, but vital, was shifting the sense of what was possible, what community could mean, how strangers could become allies, and allies could become family. As the sun started its descent toward evening, Hammer called for attention. The work slowed, then stopped, and riders gathered in the street along with neighbors and police officers, and even some of the news crews who'd stuck around to document the day. "We came here to honor a child's kindness," Hammer's voice carried across the crowd. "We came to show gratitude, to pay respect, to demonstrate what it means when the oath we live by gets reflected back to us by someone who doesn't even know the words." He turned to Amara. "Young lady, would you come here, please?" Amara approached nervously, very aware of all the eyes on her. Hammer knelt down, and despite his size, the gesture made him seem gentle, approachable. In our world, patches mean something. They represent membership achievement, respect earned through action. He reached into his vest and pulled out a patch. Not a full member patch, but something different. It showed 2 hands clasped in unity, surrounded by a circle. "This is a unity patch. It means family. It means you're one of us, not as a rider, but as someone who embodies what we're supposed to be about." He held it out to her. "With your permission, I'd like to put this on your jacket. Make it official. Make you part of the Crosswind Brotherhood family now and always." Amara looked at Grandma Ruth, who nodded through fresh tears. She looked at Bear, who smiled with pride so evident it seemed to glow from him. She looked at the hundreds of faces surrounding her, all of them waiting for her answer, all of them already knowing what it would be. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, please." Hammer pinned the patch to her hoodie with careful precision, then stepped back and saluted. Every rider in the street did the same, hundreds of hands rising in perfect unity, honoring not a warrior or a leader, but a child who'd shared her last dollar with a stranger. The moment held crystalline and perfect, and then broke into cheers and applause. Neighbors joined in, police officers too, and the sound rose into the evening air like a prayer of gratitude for the simple, powerful truth that kindness could still change the world. But Bear wasn't done. He stepped forward, holding a thick packet that Amara recognized as an envelope larger than the others, heavier with implication. "This is from all of us," he said. "Pooled resources, everyone contributing what they could. Inside is enough to settle every bill your grandmother has, to stock your pantry for months, to handle any repairs we didn't get to today, and to make sure your dreams jar gets filled faster than you ever thought possible." He placed it in Grandma Ruth's hands. "But more than that, it's a promise. You need something, you call. You're struggling, you reach out. You're family now. That means something to us. That means everything." Ruth couldn't speak. She just pulled Bear into a hug, this stranger who'd become something more, and held on, while the crowd witnessed a connection that transcended words. As twilight began to paint the sky in shades of purple and gold, the riders started preparing to leave. Engines came to life, but quietly, respectfully, no roaring, no showing off, just the steady rumble of machines being awakened for the journey home. They formed up in groups by chapter and by destination, organizing the departure with the same precision they'd shown in arriving. But each one stopped by Amara first. Each one offered a final word, a touch on the shoulder, a promise to stay connected. Phone numbers were exchanged, email addresses, shared social media accounts linked. The physical gathering might be ending, but the connections formed today were being cemented, made permanent through modern technology and ancient commitment. River was one of the last to leave. She hugged Amara tight and whispered, "You changed us all today, little sister. Don't ever forget your power. Don't ever stop giving the way you gave. The world needs it more than you know." As the bikes pulled away in waves, neighbors stood in the street, waving, children calling out goodbyes, the whole scene bathed in the golden light of approaching sunset. The roar of engines faded gradually, moving away like thunder, retreating after a storm, until finally the street was quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. It was fuller, somehow, richer, loaded with potential, and proof that impossible things could happen, that strangers could become family, that one small act could ripple outward until it transformed an entire community. Amara stood on her new porch, the swing creaking gently behind her, the patch on her hoodie catching the last rays of sun. Grandma Ruth joined her, and they stood together, looking at their transformed home, their transformed street, their transformed understanding of what was possible in this world. "You did this," Ruth said softly. "All of this started with you." "I just helped someone who needed help." "Exactly." Ruth put her arm around Amara's shoulders. "Sometimes that's all it takes. One person deciding to care when it would be easier not to. One person choosing kindness when fear or selfishness would be simpler. You chose right, baby, and look what choosing right can do." They went inside together as night fell, the house warm with new light, secure with new repairs, and filled with the tangible proof that generosity begets generosity, that kindness compounds, that one child's simple act of sharing everything she had could mobilize an army of gratitude and transform the landscape of an entire neighborhood. But in Amara's room, on her pillow, lay one final envelope that no one had seen being placed. No name on it, no indication of who it was, from just a simple white envelope that would wait until she went to bed to reveal its secret. The story wasn't over. It was only just beginning to show its full shape, to reveal the depth of what had been set in motion by a 12-year-old girl with an empty jar and a full heart. The envelope sat on her pillow like a question waiting to be asked. Amara found it when she finally dragged herself to bed around 9 o'clock, exhausted from a day that had felt like living through a year's worth of emotions compressed into 12 hours. She'd been so focused on helping Grandma Ruth sort through the gifts, organize the money process, the sheer magnitude of what had happened, that she hadn't even entered her room since the bikes had left. Now, in the quiet of evening, with the house settling around her in unfamiliar ways, no creaks from the old porch, no flicker from faulty wiring. She stood in her doorway and stared at the white envelope that definitely hadn't been there this morning. "Grandma," she called out, not taking her eyes off it. "Yes, baby." Ruth's voice came from down the hall, tired but content. "Did you put something on my bed?" "No." "Why?" Amara approached the envelope slowly, like it might transform into something else if she moved too fast. She picked it up, felt the weight of it, not heavy with money like the others had been, but substantial nonetheless. Her name was written on the front in handwriting that looked like it had been formed by hands more comfortable with wrenches than pens. Mari. She opened it carefully, sliding out a single piece of paper folded around something small and metal. The paper was lined notebook paper, the kind that came from a spiral pad, and the writing was the same rough script as on the envelope. "Mari," it began, and she could almost hear Bear's gravel voice speaking the words. "You're gonna get a lot of things today. Money, gifts, promises. All of it real, all of it given with true hearts. But I wanted to give you something different, something just from me to you without the crowd watching." She unfolded the paper completely, and a patch fell into her palm. Not like the Unity patch Hammer had pinned to her hoodie, but something else. It was smaller, simpler, with an embroidered road stretching toward a horizon, and 2 words: "Keep rolling." The letter continued, "This patch belonged to my sponsor, the man who taught me what it means to ride with honor. He gave it to me 23 years ago, when I was about ready to give up on everything myself, the brotherhood, the whole damn world. Told me the road don't end until you decide it ends. Told me to keep rolling no matter what. Because movement means you're still alive, still fighting, still believing there's something worth reaching for." Amara sat on her bed, the patch in one hand, and the letter in the other, feeling the weight of history and intention in both. He died 5 years ago. Cancer. But before he went, he told me to pass this patch to someone who understood what it really means to keep rolling, not physically, but spiritually. Someone who keeps moving forward even when it's hard, who keeps giving, even when they got nothing left to give. Today, watching you stand there with that empty jar in your hands, seeing you face down 1,000 riders like it was the most natural thing in the world I knew. You're that person. You're who he'd want to have this. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She blinked them away, needing to read the rest. "So here's what I'm asking you, keep helping people. Keep seeing need and meeting it however you can. Don't let today change that part of you, let it amplify it. Let it show you what's possible when kindness gets room to breathe and grow. And someday when you find someone who needs it, someone who reminds you why giving matters, you pass this patch on. Keep it rolling. That's the real brotherhood, not the bikes or the leather, but the commitment to keep kindness moving through the world, person to person, heart to heart." It was signed simply, "Bear, your brother on the road, even when the road is standing still." Amara held the patch up to the light, seeing the careful stitching, the worn edges that spoke of years attached to leather of miles, traveled and storms weathered. This wasn't just a gift. This was legacy. This was trust. This was Bear, saying she was worthy of carrying something that had carried him through his darkest times. She pressed the patch to her chest over her heart and let the tears come. Not sad tears, but the kind that came from being seen, truly seen by someone who understood what it meant to give everything and hope it mattered. "Mari," Grandma Ruth appeared in the doorway, concern etching her features. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Amara's voice shook, but held steady underneath. "Everything's right. More right than I knew things could be." She showed Ruth the letter, watched her grandmother read it with increasing emotion, saw the moment when understanding bloomed across her face. "Oh, sweet child," Ruth whispered, pulling Amara into a hug. "You've been given something precious. Not just today, not just the money or the repairs, but this trust, this responsibility to keep kindness alive in the world. That's the real gift." They stayed like that for a while, grandmother and granddaughter holding each other in a room that felt different now, not just because the light worked properly or the window closed all the way, but because the space itself had been transformed by belief, by proof that caring mattered, that giving echoed, that one small act could become a movement if the right people carried it forward. Later, after Ruth had gone to bed, Amara sat at her desk with the patch, the letter, and her old dreams jar, the one that had held $2.27, before she'd emptied it into Bear's palm. She unscrewed the lid, placed the patch inside, then put the jar on her windowsill, where the morning light would hit it first thing. The patch would stay there, she decided, until she found the right person to pass it to. And in the meantime, she'd start filling the jar again, not for art supplies anymore, but for the next time she saw someone who needed help. Because that's what Bear had asked of her. That's what the patch represented. That's what family did kept rolling, kept giving, kept the kindness moving like a current that could power the world if enough people plugged into it. She fell asleep that night with the unity patch still on her hoodie, both symbols of different kinds of belonging, both reminders that she was part of something larger than herself. Morning came with a gentleness that Eastgate rarely experienced, sunlight without harshness, warmth, without oppression. Amara woke to the smell of coffee and something baking, and for a moment she thought she was dreaming. But then she remembered the groceries in the pantry, the money that meant Grandma Ruth didn't have to choose between breakfast and electricity, the transformation that had happened in 12 impossible hours. She found Ruth in the kitchen, pulling cinnamon rolls from the oven, real ones, from a tube that had been in the groceries. Bear brought the kind they'd only ever had on special occasions. "Figured we earned a celebration breakfast," Ruth said, her smile soft and free. "After yesterday, after everything, we deserve something sweet." They ate together on the new porch, sitting on the swing that moved without squeaking, looking out at a street that seemed different in the morning light. The work the riders had done was evident everywhere. Fresh paint on their house and Mrs. Patterson's, the straightened fences, the Torres family's repaired gate, even new flowers planted in Mr. Freeman's yard by someone who'd noticed the dirt and had a vision. But more than the physical changes, there was something else. Neighbors were emerging earlier than usual, drawn by the same thing Amara felt a desire to be in this new version of their community, to see if yesterday's magic had survived the night, or if it would evaporate like morning mist. Mrs. Patterson came over first, carrying a plate of cookies. "Made these last night. Couldn't sleep with all the thoughts running through my head. Figured I'd share them around like those riders shared with us." She looked almost embarrassed by the gesture, this woman who'd lived on the block for 30 years and had never once brought cookies to anyone. But Ruth accepted them with grace, invited her to sit on the porch, and just like that, connection was happening again, building on what yesterday had started. Miguel Torres appeared next, his father trailing behind. "Miss Amara, Miguel's voice was shy, but determined. "That rider, the one who let me sit on his bike. He gave me his email. Said if I'm serious about motorcycles, he'd teach me about mechanical engineering, how bikes work, maybe even help me apply to technical schools when I'm older." His father, Carlos, looked overwhelmed. "He's really offering. I checked the email. It's legitimate. He's a professor at a community college in Nevada, teaches automotive technology. Says Miguel has a good mind for it, could see it in how he asked questions." Carlos's eyes were wet. "Nobody's ever... This doesn't happen to people like us." "It does now," Ruth said firmly. "It happened. It's real. And you got every right to accept that help to let your boy chase his dreams with someone willing to guide him." The morning unfolded like that, neighbors discovering connections made yesterday, following up on promises, finding that the riders had meant what they said about family. Mr. Freeman got a call from a rider called Wrench, asking about his radio offering to send a replacement if the repair didn't hold. Mrs. Patterson found a note in her mailbox with a phone number and a message. "If you need anything, you call. Family takes care of family." By noon, something remarkable was happening. The neighbors were talking about the empty carport attached to Amara's house, the one that hadn't held a car in years, that had become a storage space for broken things and forgotten dreams. "We could use it," Mrs. Patterson suggested hesitantly. "Turn it into something for the neighborhood." "Like what?" Carlos asked. "A pantry." Amara's voice surprised even herself. She'd been thinking about it since waking, the idea forming slowly, like a photograph developing. A place where people can take what they need without asking. No questions, no judgment, just help. Ruth looked at her granddaughter with something like awe. "You'd do that? Use the space like that?" "Bear's letter said to keep helping people. The riders gave us so much, enough to share. And if we stock it with food basics, things people need but can't always afford." Amara trailed off, seeing the idea take shape in her grandmother's eyes. "A community pantry," Ruth said, slowly testing the words. "Lord, yes. Yes, that's exactly what we should do." The planning started immediately. Carlos offered his carpentry skills, learned from his father, refined through years of odd jobs. Mrs. Patterson knew someone who worked at a food bank who could help with sourcing. Mr. Freeman, it turned out, had connections to a church across town that ran a similar program. Even Officer Keene, stopping by on his patrol, offered to put the word out through the department about donations. Within days, the carport was being transformed. Shelves went up, sturdy and well-built. A sign was painted, "Eastgate Community Pantry. Take what you need, give what you can." News of what had happened with the riders had spread beyond the neighborhood, and donations started arriving from people who'd seen the story on the news, who'd been moved by the simple power of shared humanity. Local businesses contributed. The corner store that usually charged too much for everything donated their near-expiration goods. A bakery across town sent day-old bread. Families from other neighborhoods brought canned goods, toiletries, baby supplies. The pantry filled with the tangible proof that yesterday's kindness was still echoing, still expanding, still creating more kindness in its wake. Amara and Ruth worked together to organize it, creating a system that preserved dignity. No sign-in sheets, no proof of need, just trust. You took what you needed. If you could give something back later, great. If not, that was fine too. The point was community care, the kind the riders had demonstrated, now adapted for daily life in Eastgate. The first person to use the pantry was a young mother Amara had seen around, but never spoken to Maria, with 2 small children and eyes that carried the weight of trying to make minimum wage stretch past its limits. She approached hesitantly, looking at the shelves like she couldn't believe they were real. "Is it really free?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Really free," Amara confirmed. "Take what you need. That's what it's here for." Maria filled a bag with essentials, pasta sauce, canned vegetables, diapers for her youngest. She kept looking at Amara, like waiting for the catch, for the moment when generosity would reveal itself as something else. But the moment never came. She left with tears streaming down her face and gratitude pouring from her in English and Spanish both. "Gracias, gracias, no sé cómo agradecer." "You just did," Ruth told her gently. "And when you're able, if you want to help someone else, you do it. That's how we say thank you here. We pass it on." Word spread fast. The pantry became a lifeline for families who'd been struggling in silence, who'd been too proud to ask for help, but couldn't refuse help that was offered freely without judgment. Lines formed, not long, but steady people coming for what they needed, and often leaving something behind for others, a few cans from their own pantry, a package of batteries, whatever small thing they could spare. The neighborhood was changing in ways both visible and invisible. People talked to each other more, helped each other more. The isolation that had defined Eastgate for so long was cracking, replaced by connection forged through shared experience and sustained by collective care. But Amara noticed something else happening too. She was being recognized. People in other neighborhoods knew her face from the news coverage. Some praised her. Some asked for autographs or selfies, treating her like a celebrity, when all she'd done was help someone who needed help. The attention felt wrong, uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the riders had come, Amara was restocking pantry shelves when a car pulled up, expensive, sleek, out of place in Eastgate. A woman climbed out designer clothes and professional demeanor, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Grandma Ruth's monthly income. "Amara Brooks?" the woman asked, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm Jennifer Walsh with the Community Heroes Foundation. We'd like to honor you at our annual gala. There's a cash prize, media coverage, and opportunity to speak about your experience to influential people who could help expand what you're doing here." Amara stared at the offered hand, feeling something twist in her stomach. "I don't want a prize." "It's $20,000. Think of what you could do with that money. How many more people you could help." "I didn't help Bear for money or recognition. I just helped because he needed help." Jennifer's smile didn't waver, but something in her eyes sharpened. "And that's exactly what makes you perfect for this. You represent pure altruism. People need to see that to be inspired by it. You could change so many lives by accepting this honor. Or I could just keep helping people right here without making it into a show." Amara felt anger rising, unfamiliar and hot. "That's what this is, isn't it? A show. You put me on a stage, give me a prize, take pictures, and then everyone feels good about themselves without actually changing anything. That's not fair, isn't it?" Amara thought about Bear's letter about keeping kindness rolling without letting it become performance. The riders didn't show up with cameras and press releases. They showed up with hammers and groceries and help. Real help. That's what matters. Not galas and prizes and people applauding while they eat expensive food. Jennifer's professional mask slipped slightly. "You're 12. You don't understand how the world works. How much good this kind of platform could..." "She understands just fine." Grandma Ruth had appeared, her presence filling the space with quiet authority. "My granddaughter understands that real change happens person to person, not through photo opportunities and tax write-offs. You want to help Eastgate donate that prize money directly to the community pantry. No gala, no speeches, no using a child's kindness to make yourself feel charitable. Jennifer opened her mouth, closed it, then retreated to her car with the rigid posture of someone who'd been dismissed and didn't like it. She drove away, and Amara felt the tension drain from her shoulders. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked Ruth. "You stood up for what you believe. That's always right even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Ruth put an arm around her. "Bear chose well when he gave you that patch. You understand what really matters." That evening, Amara pulled the dreams jar from her windowsill and looked at Bear's patch inside. Keep rolling seemed to mean more now than it had when she first read the letter. It wasn't just about persistence. It was about staying true to the purpose, not letting recognition or reward distort the purity of why you helped in the first place. She'd started saving again, adding coins to the jar around the patch. Not for art supplies anymore, she had those now gifts from the writers. She was saving for the next person who needed help. For the next bear standing at a gas station counting change, wondering if kindness still existed in the world. A month after the riders had come, Amara's routine had shifted to include the pantry. Every day after school, she'd spend an hour or two there, restocking, organizing, talking to people who came through. She learned their stories without asking the single father working 3 jobs, the elderly woman whose pension didn't stretch far enough, the family whose medical bills had crushed their budget, the young man trying to stay in college while supporting his siblings. Each person who came through reminded her why this mattered. Each story reinforced the lesson the writers had taught, that giving wasn't about grand gestures or public recognition, but about seeing need and meeting it over and over until meeting it became as natural as breathing. One afternoon, a teenager appeared, maybe 16, with bruises on his arms. He tried to hide and fear in his eyes. He grabbed food quickly, nervously, looking over his shoulder, like he expected someone to stop him. "Hey," Amara said softly. "You okay?" "Fine." The word came too fast, too defensive. "If you need more, take more. That's what it's here for." He paused, really looked at her. Why do this? What do you get out of it?" Amara thought about Bear's question at the gas station. "Why would you do this?" And her answer then, but she understood it better now, deeper. "I get to help. That's enough. That's everything." The teenager's eyes filled with tears he clearly didn't want to shed. "My stepdad. Things are bad at home. I was thinking about running. But if I run my little sister..." "You need more than food," Amara said, understanding clicking into place. She thought about the writers, about how they'd responded to need with more than just money. "Wait here." She called Officer Keene, not because she wanted to get anyone in trouble, but because she'd learned over the past month that he was someone who actually cared about helping. He arrived 20 minutes later, listened to the boy's story, made calls, set things in motion for intervention, for help, for safety. "How'd you know to call me?" Keene asked Amara later, after the boy had been connected with social services and his sister was being checked on. "Because you were here that day, when the riders came. And you could have shut it down, could have been scared or aggressive, but you weren't. You saw what was really happening and you helped. That told me who you are." Keene looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing my job." "No, you're doing more than that. You're being family. That's different." The word landed between them, family. The same word the writers had used. The same concept that had transformed a street, a neighborhood, a community. Not family by blood, but family by choice, by action, by the decision to show up for each other when it mattered. As fall approached and the weather began to cool, the pantry's impact became undeniable. The neighborhood hunger rate had dropped significantly. Emergency room visits for minor issues decreased because people could afford to stock basic medical supplies from the pantry. Kids were showing up to school better fed, more focused, more hopeful. But more than the statistics, there was something else: dignity. People weren't just surviving, they were being seen, valued, treated like they mattered. And that was changing how they saw themselves, how they moved through the world. Mrs. Patterson, who'd never done more than arrange her plastic flamingos, started volunteering at the pantry 3 days a week. Carlos Torres used his carpentry skills to teach free workshops, helping people make small repairs on their homes. Mr. Freeman's porch became an unofficial community gathering space, his radio playing while neighbors sat and talked, sharing stories and laughter, and the kind of casual connection that built strong communities. The riders checked in regularly, not all of them that would have been impossible across so many states, but enough. Bear called every Sunday asking about the pantry, about Amara, about whether she was still rolling, or if she needed someone to remind her why it mattered. River sent care packages, books, art supplies, notes of encouragement. Hammer's whole chapter adopted Eastgate, in a sense, showing up quarterly to handle bigger repair projects, to inject resources to demonstrate that the commitment made that one Sunday morning wasn't temporary. And slowly other neighborhoods started asking questions. How did you set up the pantry? What made it work? Could we do something similar? The model began to spread not through Jennifer Walsh's gala and her kind of structured charity, but organically, person to person, community to community kindness, rolling forward the way Bear had asked. Amara's dreams jar slowly filled again with coins and occasional bills. She wasn't sure what she was saving for anymore, but the act of saving felt important, like keeping a promise to herself and to Bear, and to the belief that there would always be someone else who needed help. And she'd want to be ready. One evening, about 6 weeks after the riders had come, Amara sat on the porch swing with Grandma Ruth, watching the sun set over Eastgate. The street looked different now, not just physically, though that was part of it. It looked alive in a way it hadn't before, connected, purposeful. "You proud of what we've built?" Ruth asked softly. "I'm proud of what everyone built together," Amara corrected. I just gave Bear gas money. Everything else was other people choosing to be good, choosing to help, choosing to be family. You started it, though. That matters. The first domino, the first spark that's as important as everything that comes after. Maybe more important because without it, nothing else happens. Amara thought about that, about responsibility and legacy, and the weight of being someone's catalyst. Bear's patch says, "Keep rolling." I'm trying to understand what that means. Is it just about not stopping, about persistence? Ruth was quiet for a moment, her eyes on the horizon where the sun was painting the sky in shades of fire. I think it's about momentum, about understanding that kindness, real kindness, doesn't end with one act. It rolls forward, gathering more kindness as it goes, getting bigger and stronger, until it's powerful enough to change landscapes. You gave Bear hope at a gas station. He gave it to his brothers and sisters. They gave it to this neighborhood. The neighborhood's giving it to others. That's rolling. That's the momentum of grace. What if it stops? What if people forget or get tired, or then someone starts it again? That's the beauty of it, Mari. Kindness doesn't require perfection. It just requires someone somewhere deciding to give when giving is hard. To help when helping costs something. To be family when being family demands more than blood. Ruth pulled her close. You'll do it again and again, and each time it'll roll a little farther, touch a little more, change a little deeper. That's your gift, and your calling both. They sat together as darkness fell the porch light. The new one, that worked perfectly, creating a circle of warmth in the evening. Neighbors passed waving. Cars drove slowly, respectful of the children playing in the street for the first time in years. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and someone laughed, and life happened in all its messy, beautiful, connected glory. Amara reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn dollar bill, not the same one she'd given Bear, but one that felt similar soft, from handling marked with the evidence of having traveled through many hands before reaching hers. She looked at it thinking about value and meaning, and how something as simple as money could become sacred when given with the right intention. Tomorrow, she decided, she'd be ready. Ready for the next person who needed help the next moment when giving everything mattered more than keeping anything. Ready to keep the promise Bear had asked of her, to keep the kindness rolling like a wheel that never stopped turning, like a current that never stopped flowing, like a family that never stopped showing up for each other. The patch in her dreams jar caught the porch light, its embroidered road seeming to stretch toward a horizon she couldn't see, but could feel endless, full of possibility, waiting for someone brave enough to keep rolling toward it. She was that someone. She'd always been that someone. It had just taken 1,000 bikers showing up on her doorstep to help her understand what she'd known all along, that the smallest acts could hold the biggest power, that giving was its own reward, and that family wasn't about blood or patches or even motorcycles. It was about showing up, about helping, about choosing every day to keep the kindness rolling. And she would. For as long as the road stretched ahead, for as long as people needed help, for as long as her heart held the capacity to give, she would keep rolling. 3 months had passed since the day the riders came, and winter was settling over Eastgate, with the kind of cold that found every crack, every gap, every weakness in houses that had been patched but never quite healed. But this year felt different. The pantry shelves stayed stocked even as temperatures dropped. The repaired homes held heat better. And most importantly, people didn't face the cold alone. Amara had just turned 13, a quiet birthday celebrated with Grandma Ruth and a small cake from the bakery that now donated regularly to the pantry. She was taller now, her face starting to show the shape of the woman she'd become. But her eyes held the same quality that had made Bear stop and really see her that day at the gas station. A clarity, a certainty about what mattered. She was at the pantry on a Saturday morning, the kind of bitter cold day that kept most people inside, when she noticed him. A man, maybe in his 40s, standing at the edge of the property line, like there was an invisible barrier he couldn't cross. He wasn't dressed for the weather, thin jacket, worn shoes, the kind of desperation in his posture that came from being out of options. Amara watched him for a few minutes. He'd take a step forward, then retreat. Look at the pantry sign, then look away. The war between need and pride playing out in real time across his face. She grabbed a bag and started filling it soup cans, bread, peanut butter, things that could sustain someone for a few days. Then she walked out to him, moving slowly so she wouldn't startle him. "Hi," she said simply. "You look cold. You need food." Up close, she could see the tremor in his hands, the hollowness in his cheeks. He stared at her like she was speaking a language he'd forgotten. I can't pay." "Didn't ask you to." She held out the bag. "It's free. No strings, no judgment. Just take it." His eyes filled with tears. "I had a job, had a house, had everything. And then," he gestured helplessly at himself at the ruin of whatever life he'd had before. "How'd it come to this? How'd I become the guy taking charity from a kid?" "You're not taking charity. You're accepting help from family. There's a difference." The words came automatically now, the lesson the riders had taught her, embedded so deep it had become part of her vocabulary, her world view. We all need help sometimes. The strong thing is accepting it when it's offered. He took the bag with shaking hands, and Amara saw something she recognized, the same look Bear had given her, like she'd handed him more than food, like she'd handed him back a piece of his humanity. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus. I'm Marcus." "I'm Amara, Mari. And Marcus, if you need more, you come back. This pantry doesn't run out. Too many people making sure it stays filled." He nodded, unable to speak, and walked away, clutching the bag like it contained something precious. Amara watched him go, feeling the familiar weight of understanding that she was part of something that mattered, something that rippled outward in ways she couldn't fully track, but could feel in moments like this. She went back inside the pantry to find Officer Keene there, carrying boxes. He'd become a regular presence, volunteering his off-duty hours, building relationships that were changing how the community saw police, and how police saw the community. "Saw you with that guy," Keene said, setting down the boxes. "That was well done. Natural. You've got a gift for this." "Just doing what I've been taught." Amara started unpacking cans. "Bear and the Riders, Grandma Ruth. Even you, everyone's been teaching me what family looks like. I'm just practicing." Keene smiled. "It's more than practice now, Mari. You're changing this neighborhood. Hell, you're changing the whole model of how communities care for each other. You know there are 17 other community pantries across the city now, all modeled after yours. All because you gave a biker gas money." The number stunned her. 17. 17 neighborhoods deciding that Eastgate's model built on trust and dignity and unconditional help was worth replicating. The ripple was bigger than she'd imagined. "It wasn't just me," she protested. "It was everyone. The Riders, the neighbors, people like you showing up." "It started with you." Keene's voice was firm. "Don't diminish that. Yes, others amplified it, sustained it, spread it. But you were the spark. Own that, Mari. Because the world needs more sparks, and you need to know you're capable of lighting them." Before Amara could respond, Grandma Ruth appeared in the doorway, her face troubled in a way that immediately set off alarms. "Mari, baby, we got a situation. You need to come see." They walked together to the house, and Amara saw immediately what had Ruth worried. The porch. The beautiful porch the Riders had rebuilt had a new addition. Spray painted across the front steps in harsh red letters, "Charity Case." The words hit like a physical blow. Amara felt her stomach twist, anger and hurt warring for dominance. Someone had been here in the night and tried to poison what they'd built with bitterness and small-minded cruelty. Who would do this? Amara's voice shook. "Someone who's hurting," Ruth said quietly. "Someone who sees what you've built and feels left out or judged or reminded of their own failures. Doesn't make it right, but understanding why helps us figure out how to respond." Officer Keene was already on his radio calling it in, but his face showed the same frustration Amara felt. "This is vandalism. We'll investigate, find who's responsible." "No." The word came from Amara, clear and certain. Both adults turned to look at her. "I mean, yes, investigate. But that's not the answer. The answer is—" She trailed off, the idea forming as she spoke. "The answer is to paint over it. Not to hide it, but to transform it. To show that hate can be covered by something better." "What are you thinking?" Ruth asked. "A mural, right here on the porch where everyone can see it. Something that shows what this place is really about. Family, community, help without judgment. We get artists involved, neighbors involved, make it a community project. Turn their hate into our statement about love." Keene nodded slowly. "That could work. That could really work. I know a couple of local artists who do community murals. They might volunteer their time if they hear the story. Within hours, the plan was in motion. Word spread through the neighborhood and beyond. The story of the vandalism hit social media, but instead of sparking outrage, it sparked something else: offers to help. Artists reached out. Paint companies donated supplies. People who'd never set foot in Eastgate before showed up asking how they could contribute. By the next morning, the porch steps had been cleaned, primed, and a design had been sketched. It showed hands of all colors and sizes reaching toward each other, not quite touching, but clearly straining to connect. Words wove through the image: family, dignity, hope, help, love. Amara worked alongside professional muralists, neighborhood kids, elders, who'd lived in Eastgate for decades. Each person added something: a brushstroke, a detail, a piece of themselves to the collective creation. The act of painting became meditation therapy statement. What had been meant to shame them was becoming something that unified them. Mrs. Patterson brought lunch for everyone. Carlos Torres set up a canopy in case it rained. Mr. Freeman provided the soundtrack, his radio playing old soul music that seemed to guide the brushstrokes. Even Miguel, the teenager who'd connected with the writer about engineering, was there, helping mix paints and learning about color theory from the artists. As they worked, Amara noticed a figure watching from across the street, a young woman, maybe early 20s, with hard eyes and harder posture. There was something in the way she looked at the mural, a mixture of anger and longing that reminded Amara of Marcus, the man she'd helped that morning. The same war between pride and need. During a break, Amara approached her. "Hi, I'm Mari. You want to help paint?" The woman's jaw tightened. "Why would I want to help with that? Because it's for everyone, including you." Amara kept her voice gentle. "Whatever you're carrying, whatever made you angry enough to hurt us, it doesn't have to define what comes next. You can be part of building something better." "You don't know anything about me." The woman's voice cracked slightly. "You don't know what I've been through, what I've lost. You're right, I don't. But I know what it feels like to need help and be scared to accept it. I know what it feels like to think you're alone." Amara gestured to the mural, to the people working together. "You're not alone. None of us are. That's what this is about." And the woman's eyes filled with tears she clearly didn't want to shed. It wasn't supposed to." She took a shaky breath. "I did it. The graffiti. I was drunk and angry, and you all looked so perfect, so put together, and I just wanted to ruin something because everything in my life is ruined." The confession hung in the air between them. Amara felt the weight of it, the pain beneath the action, the cry for help disguised as destruction. "What's your name?" Amara asked. "Sarah." "Sarah, you hurt us. That's true. But you also gave us an opportunity to show what we're really made of, to prove that hate can be transformed. So thank you in a weird way." She held out a paintbrush. "Now help us finish it. Help us make it beautiful. That's the best apology you could give." Sarah stared at the brush like it was a lifeline and a trap in equal measure. Then slowly she took it. Her hand shook as she approached the mural, and people made space for her without asking questions, accepting her presence with the same grace they'd learned from watching the riders accept Amara. Officer Keene watched the exchange from a distance and made a decision. When Sarah was done painting, when the mural was complete, and she was preparing to leave, he approached her quietly. "I could arrest you for the vandalism," he said, "but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to ask you to come to the station tomorrow. Not for charges, for help. We've got resources programs, connections to counseling and job placement. Let us help you, Sarah. Let this community be for you what it's been for so many others." Sarah nodded, tears streaming freely now. I don't deserve this. Any of this. Deserving's got nothing to do with it, Keene replied. Need does, and you clearly need help, so let us give it. The mural was finished by sunset, and it was stunning. What had been meant as an insult had become a declaration, a mission statement, a work of art that captured everything the pantry and the riders and the neighborhood had become. People took photos, posted them online, and the story spread not of vandalism, but of transformation, of grace, of a community that refused to be defined by the worst thing done to them. That night, Amara sat on the porch with Grandma Ruth, both of them looking at the mural in the fading light. The hands reaching for each other seemed to move in the shadows, straining toward connection. You did good today, Ruth said. With Sarah, with all of it. You could have been angry, vindictive. Instead, you saw her pain and met it with compassion. Bear's letter said to keep helping people. Didn't specify which people or under what conditions. Just to help. Amara pulled her knees to her chest. She needed help. So I helped. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. Someone who sees need and meets it, regardless of how that need manifests. They sat in comfortable silence until Amara's phone buzzed. A text from Bear. Heard about the mural. Heard what you did with the vandal. Kid, you're living the oath better than most writers I know. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Amara smiled, typing back, just keeping it rolling. His response came immediately. That's my girl. Speaking of which, check your email. Got something to show you. She opened her email and found a message from Bear with a video attachment. The thumbnail showed a group of riders gathered in what looked like a meeting hall. She pressed play. Bear's face filled the screen. Mari, this is the quarterly gathering of the Crosswind Brotherhood. About 300 of us here from across the eastern states. I told them your story, not just the gas station, but everything since. The pantry, the mural, how you handled the vandal. And they voted. Unanimous decision. The camera panned to show the assembled riders, all of them holding up patches identical to the one in her dreams jar. We're making Keep Rolling an official Brotherhood patch. Anyone who embodies the oath the way you do, who helps without expectation, and keeps the kindness moving, they get this patch. And every patch given out comes with the same instruction you got. Pass it on when you find someone worthy. You started a new tradition, kid. A new way of honoring what we're supposed to be about. The video ended, and Amara sat stunned. Her one act at a gas station had become a tradition within a brotherhood that spanned the country. The ripple was still expanding, still creating waves she couldn't fully measure. What is it? Ruth asked, seeing her expression. Amara showed her the video, watched her grandmother's face transform with pride and wonder. Lord have mercy, Ruth whispered. Baby, do you understand what you've done? You've changed not just this neighborhood, but a whole culture. Those riders, they'll carry this forward for generations. Every patch given, every story told, every act of kindness inspired, it all traces back to you giving everything you had to help a stranger. The weight of it should have been crushing, but instead Amara felt lifted. Not by pride exactly, but by purpose. By the understanding that her life had meaning beyond what she could see, that her actions rippled outward in ways that would outlast her, that she was part of something vast and beautiful and fundamentally good. Winter deepened, and the pantry became more critical than ever. Heating bills drove families into tough choices, and the shelves offered relief from those impossible decisions. Amara spent more time there learning everyone's story, understanding that each person who walked through represented a different kind of struggle, a different kind of courage. She met veterans who couldn't afford medications, elderly people whose social security didn't stretch far enough, families where medical emergencies had created financial catastrophes. Each one taught her something about resilience, about dignity, about the complex reality of poverty that couldn't be solved with simple solutions, but could be eased with consistent, compassionate help. Sarah became a regular volunteer, working off her guilt by working for the community. She and Amara developed an unlikely friendship, the vandal and the victim united by understanding that hurt people, but helped people, help people. I was so angry, Sarah told her one day while they were organizing donations. My mom got sick, medical bills destroyed us. I lost my job trying to care for her. And when she died anyway, I broke. Seeing you all helping each other, having this perfect community thing, it made me feel worse about my own situation. Like I'd failed even harder because I couldn't build what you'd built. You didn't fail. You just didn't know how to ask for help. Amara handed her a box of canned goods. That's what this place teaches, that asking isn't weakness, accepting isn't failure, and needing doesn't make you less. It makes you human. The lessons kept coming day after day, person after person. And through it all, Amara kept her dreams jar on the windowsill, the patch inside a constant reminder of her purpose. She added coins when she could took them out, when someone needed help more than she needed savings. The jar became a living thing, its contents flowing in and out like breath, like tide, like the natural rhythm of giving and receiving that sustained communities. Spring arrived, eventually bringing thaw and renewal. The pantry celebrated its 6-month anniversary with a block party that drew people from across the city. Volunteers, donors, recipients, all of them united by the simple belief that care mattered, that dignity deserved protection, that family extended beyond blood. Bear showed up riding in with a dozen other members of his chapter. They brought supplies, money, and something else, stories. Stories of how the Keep Rolling patch was being distributed across the brotherhood of acts of kindness, inspired by Amara's example of communities being transformed by people who'd heard the story and decided to replicate the model. You started a movement, Bear told her, standing in front of the mural that had been born from hate. Not intentionally, maybe, but movements rarely start intentionally. They start with one person doing what's right and others recognizing the truth of it. I just wanted to help. Amara said the words, feeling inadequate for what had grown from them. Exactly. That's the whole point. You didn't set out to change the world. You set out to help one person, and helping one person led to helping another, which led to this. He gestured at the crowd, at the pantry, at the neighborhood transformed. That's how real change happens. Not through grand plans or strategic initiatives, but through individual acts of grace that compound into something bigger than any one person could design. The celebration continued around them, food and music and laughter, and the kind of joy that came from people who'd struggled finding reasons to hope. Amara watched it all, feeling the weight and lightness of what she'd helped create. As evening approached and the party was winding down, a car pulled up, expensive, official-looking. Jennifer Walsh climbed out, the same woman who'd tried to honor Amara with a gala months ago. But her demeanor was different now, humbler, less polished. Amara, she said, approaching cautiously, I owe you an apology. When I came before, I was trying to use your story to make myself feel important, to make my organization look good. I see that now. I've been watching what you've built here, and I understand what you tried to tell me, that real change is quiet, personal, sustained, not performances or prizes. Amara studied her, looking for the catch. Okay, so why are you here? To ask how we can actually help. Not with galas or publicity, but with real resources. Money for the pantry, connections to food banks, whatever you actually need, rather than what we think looks good on paper. Jennifer's voice was sincere. "You were right. I was wrong. And I'd like the chance to do better." Amara glanced at Grandma Ruth, who nodded slightly. "We could use help with refrigeration. Fresh food spoils, but if we had proper storage, we could offer more. And connections to farms. Maybe fresh produce is expensive, but if we could get donations directly from growers, I can make that happen." Jennifer pulled out a notebook, started writing. "What else?" They talked for an hour. Jennifer listening more than speaking, learning what the community actually needed rather than assuming. By the time she left, a partnership had been formed, one built on respect and understanding rather than exploitation and performance. "People can change," Ruth observed as they watched Jennifer drive away. "Not everyone, maybe, but enough. Enough that it's worth giving them the chance." The months continued to roll by, and Amara's 13th year became a series of lessons about community responsibility and the complex beauty of human connection. She learned that helping wasn't always comfortable, that grace sometimes demanded more than she thought she could give, that sustaining a movement required different skills than starting one. But through it all, the patch in her dreams jar reminded her of the purpose. Keep rolling. Keep helping. Keep believing that kindness mattered even when, especially when the evidence suggested otherwise. One afternoon in late summer, nearly a year after the riders had first come, Amara was at the pantry when a familiar figure appeared. Marcus, the man she'd helped that bitter cold morning, was back. But he looked different, cleaned up, healthier, with light in his eyes that had been absent before. "I wanted you to know," he said, his voice steady now, sure. "I got into a program. Rehab job training housing assistants. Been sober 4 months. Got a job starting next week. None of it would have happened if you hadn't seen me that day, if you hadn't treated me like I was worth helping." Amara felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so proud of you. I'm here because I want to give back. Want to volunteer, help others the way you helped me." And he pulled something from his pocket, a small envelope. "I want to donate. It's not much, just $50 from my first paycheck. But I want it to go to someone like I was someone who needs to know they're not forgotten." She took the envelope, understanding the significance of the gesture. This wasn't just money. It was proof that the cycle worked, that helping created more, helping that kindness rolled forward, gathering momentum exactly like Bear had said. "Marcus, this is perfect. This is everything." She hugged him, this stranger who'd become family, this broken man, who'd found his way to healing through a bag of groceries and an offer of dignity. That night, Amara made a decision. She took the patch from her dreams jar, held it up to the light one last time, and then carefully, reverently, she pinned it to Marcus's jacket. "What are you doing?" he asked, confused. "Passing it on. That's what I'm supposed to do. Bear gave this to me with instructions when I found someone who embodied the oath. Someone who understood about keeping kindness rolling. I was supposed to give it to them." She met his eyes. "You're that person, Marcus. You took help when you needed it, and now you're giving it back. That's what this patch means. That's who you are." Marcus stared at the patch, at the embroidered road stretching toward an invisible horizon. I'm not worthy of this." "Neither was I. Neither is anyone really. But Bear chose me anyway, and I'm choosing you. Keep rolling, Marcus. Keep helping. And when you find someone who gets it, who really understands you, pass it on. That's how this works. That's how we keep it alive." He left with the patch on his jacket and tears in his eyes, another link in a chain that stretched across the country, across time, connecting people through the simple revolutionary act of caring for each other. Amara felt the absence of the patch from her jar, but also the rightness of it. This was what Bear had asked of her, not to hold it forever, but to recognize when it was time to let it roll forward. The empty space in the jar was proof she'd understood the lesson. Proof she was living, the oath, proof that the movement was bigger than any one person or moment. The anniversary of the rider's visit arrived on a Sunday morning that felt like a mirror of that first impossible day. Amara woke early, stood on the porch, now adorned with the beautiful mural, and watched the sunrise paint the sky in familiar colors. Grandma Ruth joined her, coffee in hand, both of them quiet with memory and gratitude. "Year ago today," Ruth said softly, "1,000 bikes filled this street." "Best day of my life," Amara replied. "Scared me half to death at the time, but best day. Because it showed you what's possible. Showed all of us." They stood together as the neighborhood woke around them. The pantry was well established now, running smoothly with volunteers and donations, and a waiting list of other communities wanting to learn the model. The streets were safer, the houses better maintained, the sense of community stronger than anyone could remember. But more than the physical changes, there was something else, a culture of care that had taken root. People helped each other automatically now, without fanfare or expectation. The riders had planted that seed, Amara had nurtured it, and the whole community had grown it into something sustainable. Around noon, a familiar rumble started building in the distance. Amara's heart leaped. She looked at Ruth, who smiled knowingly. "Didn't think they'd forget, did you?" The bikes appeared, dozens of them this time, instead of hundreds. A manageable gathering, an anniversary celebration, rather than an overwhelming invasion. Bear led the procession, pulling up to the house with the same care he'd shown a year ago. He climbed off his bike and approached the porch, but this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. He climbed the steps and pulled Amara into a hug that spoke volumes about pride and family, and the bonds forged through shared understanding. "Heard you passed the patch on," he said when he released her. "To someone who needed it, someone who got it." "That's exactly right. That's exactly what you were supposed to do." He turned to address the assembled riders. "Brothers and sisters, a year ago, we came here to honor a child's kindness. Today we come back to witness what that kindness built. Look at this street. Look at this community. Look at what one act of grace created when it was given room to grow." The riders applauded, and neighbors emerged from houses drawn by the sound, but not frightened this time. They knew what this was: family returning, checking in, celebrating the anniversary of the day everything changed. The afternoon became a reunion, old friends reconnecting, stories being shared, updates being given. River brought news that her chapter had started 3 pantries in Montana. Hammer reported that the Keep Rolling patch had been distributed 47 times across the Brotherhood, each one creating ripples of kindness in different communities. Sage showed photos of a mural in Detroit, inspired by the one on Amara's porch. The movement was alive, growing, spreading in ways Amara couldn't have imagined when she'd poured her savings into Bear's palm. As sunset approached, Bear pulled Amara aside. "Got something for you. From all of us." He handed her an envelope, not thick with cash this time, but containing something else. She opened it to find a letter signed by hundreds of riders, each signature, accompanied by a brief note of thanks, of recognition, of family, claiming family. But there was more. At the bottom of the envelope was a new patch identical to the one she'd given Marcus, but with one difference. This one had her name embroidered on it. "Mari, where it started." "You'll always be the beginning of this story," Bear said. "Every patch given out, every act of kindness inspired every community, transformed it, all traces back to you. This patch is yours to keep, to remember that one small act from a 12-year-old girl changed everything." Amara held the patch, feeling the weight of legacy and love. "I don't need a patch to remember. I see it every day in this neighborhood, in the pantry, in the people who help each other now without thinking twice." I know, but we need you to have it. Need you to know that you're honored, recognized, loved by a family that spans this whole country. You're ours, Mari. Forever." The celebration continued into the evening, and as darkness fell, the riders prepared to leave once again. But this time the departure felt different. Not an ending, but an affirmation. They'd be back. They'd keep checking in. The connection formed a year ago wasn't temporary. It was permanent, woven into the fabric of who they all were. Bear was the last to leave. He stood with Amara on the porch, both of them looking at the mural, at the words about family and dignity and love. "You changed me," he said quietly. "Saved me in ways I'm still discovering. And through me, you've changed hundreds of others. Maybe thousands by now. That's the power of what you did, not just the act itself, but the permission it gave everyone else to believe that kindness still matters, that helping still works, that one person really can make a difference." "You changed me too," Amara replied. "Showed me that family isn't about blood. Showed me that the world is full of people ready to be good if someone just reminds them how. Showed me that my life can mean something if I keep choosing to help." They hugged one more time, and then Bear climbed on his bike. He started the engine, that deep, powerful rumble that had terrified and transformed this neighborhood a year ago, and pulled away slowly, respectfully, a guardian returning to the road, but never really leaving. Amara stood on the porch, long after the sound of his engine had faded. Grandma Ruth beside her, both of them, wrapped in the kind of contentment that came from knowing you'd done something right, something that mattered, something that would outlast you. "What are you thinking about?" Ruth asked. "About the jar, about how empty it is now without the patch." Amara smiled. "But I'm thinking I'll fill it again. Keep saving. Because there's always going to be someone who needs help, and I want to be ready. That's my girl. Always ready to give, always ready to help, always ready to be family to someone who needs it." They went inside together. The house warm and secure, the pantry outside ready for Monday morning's visitors. The neighborhood settled into a rhythm of care that would sustain it through whatever challenges came next. Amara placed the new patch, Mari, where it started, on her windowsill, next to the empty jar, both of them catching the moonlight. Both of them reminders of purpose and promise, and the beautiful momentum of grace. She thought about Bear's message from a year ago, the words that had shaped her understanding of what it meant to help keep helping people. Someday you'll wear your own patch. She was wearing it now. Not physically, that one was for display, for memory, for inspiration. But spiritually, emotionally, she wore it every day in how she moved through the world, in how she saw need and met it, in how she kept the kindness rolling forward like a wheel that never stopped turning. The story that had started with $2.27 and a wrinkled dollar at a gas station had become something magnificent. A movement, a culture, a living testament to the truth that one person's choice to care could transform landscapes, communities, and lives. As she drifted to sleep that night, Amara's last thought was of tomorrow, of the pantry opening, of people coming for help, of her being there to offer it, of the jar slowly filling again with coins and crumpled bills, waiting for the next person who needed everything she had. Because that's what family did. That's what the oath demanded. That's what it meant to keep rolling, to never stop helping, never stop giving, never stop believing that kindness was the most powerful force in the world. And she would keep that promise. For Bear, for the riders, for Grandma Ruth, for every person who'd ever needed help, and found it in the hands of a stranger who chose to become family. She would keep rolling. The road stretched ahead, endless and full of possibility, and Amara Brooks, 13-years-old patch-bearer, pantry founder spark that had lit a movement was ready for every mile of it. The story didn't end that night. It couldn't end because kindness doesn't stop. It just keeps rolling, gathering speed and strength, and fellow travelers transforming everything it touches, proving again and again that the smallest acts hold the biggest power, that love multiplies when it's given freely, and that one child's decision to help a stranger can change the entire world. $1.27. One act of grace, 1,000 lives transformed. And counting. Always counting. Always rolling. Always family.